Have we heard the craziest theory about Trump yet? The bizarre war on hydroxychloroquine. Have grocery store workers had enough of the risk? Our media continues to spew communist Chinese propaganda, the threat of turnkey totalitarianism, and why isn't Biden getting Me Too'd? That's coming up.
Governor Cuomo today reported an interesting data from New York, namely that the number of hospitalizations, the number of admissions to intensive care, and the number of requirements for intubations over the last 3 days have actually started to level off. So again, everybody who knows me knows I'm very conservative about making projections, but those are the kind of good signs that you look for. You never even begin to think about claiming victory prematurely, but that's the first thing you see when you start to see the turnaround. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do. That tells me, instead of saying, that's pretty good, it's we got there through mitigation. We cut off the stream of people who ultimately required hospitalization, required intubation, required all of the kinds of extreme methods. So we just got to realize that this is an indication, despite all the suffering and the death that has occurred, that what we have been doing has been working. So the call that I say every time I get to this podium is just keep it up, because this is going to get us out of it. This is our best and only great public health tool.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show, everyone. There you had the repetition of the mantra from the health experts, from the epidemiologists, from the various folks that we're now listening to and hearing from every day. We're being told that this is progress, and it's certainly good news insofar as there are fewer cases, insofar as there are fewer deaths now happening than had been happening mere days before here in New York. And this is going to be viewed as the test case for what is possible and what is, in fact, necessary for other parts of the nation that go through a similar outbreak. Probably won't be on the same scale, but it might be something where the health resources could become quickly overwhelmed, and there will be all kinds of concerns about how we address that going forward. Is this going to roll, this virus going to roll across the rest of the country in a much more dangerous fashion than it currently has, other than in places like New York and a handful of other major cities that have gotten hit very, very badly? This is now the big discussion. Okay, we keep going with this. I was watching the Cuomo press conference here in New York. He's obviously governor of New York State. I'm watching the Cuomo press conference, and he's saying that we've been doing this, at least in New York, for 37 days. And it was a reminder to me that while we're living our life so much by all of these numbers, one number that we're going to have to keep in mind is how many days we've been at this. I think in New York, we're going to see that number hit 90 of lockdown pretty definitively. I think that's where we're heading. They're not going to let up on this. The Fauci plan here, as it's being explained, and remember, everyone should be able to have a discussion about this. Everyone should be able to voice their opinion without being shouted down or have horrible things said to them, because this is affecting everyone, and the suffering is widespread. It is a disease. It is also a depression. And it is causing, and that's an economic depression, it's also causing a lot of depression for people. And we're going to see a very miserable toll that this lockdown has had on millions and millions of people. Tucker Carlson was talking about this last night on his show, where he talked about the rise in the domestic abuse situation at home, child abuse at home, alcoholism, drug overdose, serious mental illness, all of these things that will be directly attributable to this lockdown that now is largely nationwide. I know there are a few states that are not quite as severe in their lockdown circumstance, but this is now what we're dealing with. I just feel like we're setting ourselves up here for quite an issue, quite a problem going forward. We keep getting told to flatten the curve. Okay, well, we were told to flatten the curve. And I'm going to share thoughts with you here. I'm going to tell you this right now. Some of what I say to you in terms of analysis, obviously our facts we always have to get correct, and that's a promise that I make to you. But some of the analysis I share, I could be wrong. This is not my area of expertise, and a vast majority of the people you hear talking about this on the television or on the radio, it's not their area of expertise either. But we're smart people here, right? We think through things. We approach problems in a rational and reasonable fashion. And here's where I've got a big concern. We're told that we need to flatten the curve and that it's starting to work, but we can't let up. When can we let up? What does that look like? Because we had been told, at least in New York, and this is true, I believe, in some of the other cities where they've been very concerned about pretty large-scale outbreaks, certainly on a per capita basis, we had been told this is about making sure the healthcare system doesn't get overwhelmed. It turns out in New York, mitigation, there's no way that the healthcare system not being overwhelmed is a direct result of the most extreme mitigation, unless I'm misreading the timelines, which I suppose is possible. It seems that the models that they had that were taking mitigation into effect, they're trying to say, if we mitigate, this is what we're looking at. Those models have dramatically, in New York, overstated hospitalizations, ICU beds needed, and deaths. That's just a fact. That I know for sure, that the models have been wrong, and the models have been wrong for a few weeks. We have been told that this was unnecessary pain that we have to go through here, economic pain, psychological, emotional, house arrest, mass house arrest, because we can't let our healthcare systems get overwhelmed. All right. But the healthcare system here in New York is stretched, but it has not yet gone well beyond capacity. So if we keep going down, if the curve continues to flatten, are we then going to be told that any mitigation measures that could bring that curve back up, that we take out of, that we remove, right? If we decide to loosen things up a bit, try to reopen some parts of the economy and lessen some of the more extreme measures, what I need to know, or what I want to know right now is, okay, then how are we supposed to be in a much better situation from now? And I'm sure that there are answers for this, but we need to think through this one. Because you also have Dr. Fauci and others who, remember, Fauci's his mission is maximum public health safety, maximum reduction of the numbers of people infected. That's his only mission. He knows nothing about the economy. He knows nothing about American civilization or protecting our way of life. He's just an average Joe with all that stuff. I shouldn't say knows nothing about it, has no particular expertise in those matters. He knows about viruses. And we're being told that this is an absolutely necessary measure. Really, it's the only measure that will have any real effect. But we're also being told that this could go on for a very, very long time. Play clip 7.
You said you wanted to get back to normal as soon as possible. Will we truly get back to normal in this country before there's an actual vaccine that's available to everybody? How do you start lifting the restrictions safely?
Yeah, well, John, if back to normal means acting like there never was a coronavirus problem, I don't think that's going to happen until we do have a situation where you can completely protect the population. But when we say getting back to normal, we mean something very different from what we're going through right now. Because right now we are in a very intense mitigation. When we get back to normal, we will go back gradually to the point where we can function as a society. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if you want to get to pre-coronavirus, that might not ever happen in the sense of the fact that the threat is there. But I believe with the therapies that will be coming online and with the fact that I feel confident that over a period of time we will get a good vaccine, that we will never have to get back to where we are right back now. So if that means getting back to normal, then we'll get back to normal.
Okay. That's an answer that deals with some of the big questions that I have. I think that we all need to hear some of this. He's saying that we're buying time for the healthcare system. We're also buying time for better therapeutics. This vaccine talk that I keep hearing every day, yeah, vaccine would be amazing. It's a year away. It might be 2 years away. And not to be a downer, because we don't need any help with that these days, we still don't have a SARS vaccine. And people have been researching that for a long time. We still haven't figured out some of the necessary medical steps to beat other diseases that are already out there that are very similar to COVID-19. So, by the way, I spoke to a doctor yesterday who insists on calling it Wuhan virus or Chinese coronavirus. So that was interesting. He's like, we're not going to do this thing where the international medical community gets to obscure the background of this disease and how it was covered up in the beginning, because we are all paying the price for this now. But here's what we're being told. Lockdown will not be like it is right now indefinitely. Great. I'm glad to hear that we're not planning to do a series we're not planning to do just a continuous lockdown like this. Piece in the New York Times yesterday, another epidemiologist, another doctor out there saying, well, we might have to do a series of lockdowns. We might have to do a whole series of lockdowns. And to that, I would just say the damage that will do to the economy, and also the lack of compliance that we're going to start to get into as a country, as a nation, it's going to be a real issue. You're going to tell me that after this, when people are allowed to finally go out and live life a little bit and start to see friends and loved ones and start to feel a bit of normalcy, that come September, October, you're going to say, okay, everybody, lock yourself down we're going into the flu season, so you've got to figure this would have to parallel that. We're going to go lock down for 6 months, another 6 months. I just don't think people will do it. I think we all have our limits, right? And maybe our limits differ from place to place. It's stunning to me, and I'll talk more about this today on the show, how quickly people are willing to just give up whatever, not just give up their rights, but give up the right to even talk about their rights. They don't even want to bring up what's going on. They just want to act like everything is fine because the government's telling them to do something. I am trying to look ahead to where all of this is going so that we're not surprised, as we've been surprised by the ferocity of this virus, that we're not facing something that we'll look back on and say, if only we had thought this through more, we'd be in a better place. If only we had anticipated, made better preparation, things would be looking a whole lot brighter right now in 6 months or 9 months. And that means that this reopening of America that we're talking about tomorrow, the president has been focusing more on this. It's got to happen. And that also means the preparation for the public, preparation of the public's psychology for what will be some degree of enhanced risk. I keep saying this. People don't want to say this. It's just not true that there wouldn't be additional risk from the virus with a lessening of mitigation measures based on everything we know about the virus. And there's some people who are still arguing the case, and I don't have the data to back this up yet, but there are people who are arguing the case that the across-the-board lockdown, yes, of course, there have to be mitigation measures, but which ones are really worthwhile? Washing hands? Yes. Masks? Turns out, yes. Separating those who are immunocompromised or the elderly from the general population, making sure that they're safe? Yes. Schools? More questions about that. There's a lot of indicators that sending young people who, I know that, everyone can show me data that, there's someone who's 12 who got this, who's very, very sick somewhere. Okay, well, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of cases at a minimum in the U.S., probably millions when we do serology tests. Who knows? We'll find out. And you can, so far, unless I'm missing something, you can count the number of severe cases of COVID-19 for young people, let's say teenagers, 16, 17, on one hand. And there's no way that you only have a handful of people who are 16 or 17, given how infectious this is, who have had the disease. And so what you have here is perhaps the prevention of a herd immunity effect in the schools for people who are young. Now, I know you'd say, Buck, what about the staff? And look, none of this is perfect. None of this is without risk. I'm just thinking through this. But you have, and you could have said a lot of people in the schools who teach or older, maybe they should stay, they should be in that extra protected category, be paid to stay at home. But a lot of teachers are 25 or 30 or 35, and, they should have been able perhaps to make the choice to continue teaching and have kids in the schools who, instead of going home and being quarantined and now possibly infecting, because remember, the infection already spread. The infection had already spread widely. It was already community spread. We were hearing all about that before all the lockdowns went into effect. So there was a big chance for the virus to spread all over the place. And then we're told, all right, everyone go home and no more school. Well, the most effective mechanism of transmission of the disease, based on everything that I'm hearing and reading, is transmission at home, which makes sense. It's duration and level of virus, duration of exposure, confined space. So the lockdown across the board measure is clearly open to some rethinking going forward, and we'll see if we're able to do that. But then there's this really bizarre situation that's unfolding, and I'm almost having trouble processing it because it feels like this is such a serious moment that is so beyond the usual anti-Trump madness, the Trump derangement syndrome that characterized 3 years of Trump's presidency that were incredible, peaceful, prosperous. Everything was going great. All the stuff that you were told to be worried about for the first 3 years of Trump's presidency were lies. I mean, all the things that we were supposed to be so worried, the corruption and the Stormy Daniels payoff and Russia collusion. I was hoping, I wouldn't say I would think, I was hoping that there would be a moment here where that level of anti-Trump crazy might just fade away a little bit. But instead, we're seeing that the same people who Trump drove insane by beating Hillary and becoming president are now insane when it comes to Trump and dealing with this virus. And this brings me to the war on hydroxychloroquine, which I will have to explain. Does hydroxychloroquine work? That's the huge question. Right now, there are a lot of doctors who have gone on the record saying that they believe that it is helpful. That leaves, as I've said to you, a lot of open territory. Now, there are some doctors, perhaps we're not hearing from, who think that it doesn't do anything. I would like to hear more from those doctors as to why they think that when there's some of their colleagues who do a lot of observation of patients and are working with this on the front lines are big believers in it being, remember, useful, right? You know, ibuprofen can be useful for you as a fever reducer. It doesn't mean that ibuprofen is a cure for the flu, right? It doesn't mean that just because something can be helpful, that's not the same thing as saying, okay, well, we don't have to worry about it. But that's what we're trying to find out now. This seems like an entirely non-political question. Does a drug that is in widespread usage already and has been for decades, does a drug work, and could it help us in at least lessening the rates of severe illness and death that are coming along with COVID-19? This should be like finding out at what temperature does water boil, right? This should be a straight up scientific question, a scientific quest. And the policy implications of it are clear, and I'll get into those too. But this should be a yes or no. Instead, it turns into people are opposing this quite obviously, quite visibly, because Trump is hoping that it works. That is completely insane. Here's the headline from the New York Times. Okay, this was yesterday. They're digging in as deep as they can. Trump's aggressive advocacy of malaria drug for treating coronavirus divides medical community. Aggressive advocacy? He's saying that he hopes that a drug that's already out there that doctors have used and say they think it is helping will turn out to be very helpful. I thought we were all on the same page here for rooting for America and saving lives, right? I'm told that we're supposed to operate from that sense that we're all using good faith here. Why would anyone oppose? Why would any person say anything other than, please, God, let's have hydroxychloroquine be a very effective treatment when we really get it as an early enough intervention, use it appropriately? Why wouldn't anyone feel that way? No one, not a single person in the administration, including President Trump, has said this is a cure or even that it works. Trump has been saying that he thinks there might be good things ahead. He's heard good things. He's not saying, but he then says, I'm not saying it works. I'm not saying it doesn't. We are hopeful. Hope from Trump, though, has to be spat back in his face from the left. That's the truth. They won't accept a hopeful Trump. They won't accept his efforts to try to prevent people from panicking. They'll say that that's all lies. He's lying. He's not trying to prevent panic by saying, we'll be okay. How do you know we'll be okay? These people are insane. And I have to say, it's not surprising at all that they're taking this position, because they were insane before we got to this very stressful and very difficult moment in our nation's history. So they didn't learn some lesson here. If anything, the left feels that this is now the culmination, all the warnings that they had given us about Trump, all the things that they had told us for years. Oh, he's reckless, he's stupid, he doesn't care, he's terrible at the job, all these things. They feel that a virus that has crushed countries all over the world, including the most, advanced, sophisticated, wealthy European nations, a virus that is ravaging the whole planet, is Trump, is showing that Trump is at fault. That Trump is really the problem here. In fact, you have Susan Rice, who, straight remember, this is a former national security advisor. I've been telling this all along. Trump has blood on his hands. This is going to be the mantra. It used to be Trump does Russia's bidding. Trump cheated in the election. Trump does Russia's bidding. Now going into this fall, where they're hoping to give us confused Mr. Magoo Biden as the person to take over the country because he's going to do such a good job. We'll talk about the sexual assault allegation. Person on the record, woman named, worked for him on his Senate staff in the 90s. No difference at all from the Brett Kavanaugh allegations, except this woman's allegations actually are rooted in some credibility and fact. The Kavanaugh allegations, she couldn't even prove she ever met the guy. Ever. But we'll get there later on in the show. Here's what Susan Rice is saying about President Trump and the blood on his hands. Let's just hear it. Play 12.
Rather than act promptly, when in early January, they learned from both the World Health Organization, which was notified at the end of December, and from the Chinese government that there was an unusual and dangerous outbreak underway in Wuhan area. Rather than moving immediately from very early January to do the things that we know we have to do, get in place the testing capacity, scale it up so that it's widely available, surge the purchase and the distribution of personal protective equipment, ventilators, masks, gloves, gowns, and get that to our hospital systems, build out our bed capacity, call back medical professionals, all these things that states and locals are now doing on the fly. These are the things that we know we needed to do and do at the outset. And so they didn't do that. They waited 2 months. It's not the 1 month that the New York Times had a headline, a wasted month. It was a wasted 2 months. And those 2 months have meant the difference between many tens of thousands of Americans dying who might otherwise not have died.
Total rewriting of history, in that nobody was advocating. I remember nobody was advocating for all these things 2 months ago. No one. Dr. Fauci in January was saying, don't worry about this. So how do you go from don't worry about this with your top public health expert to, yeah, we need to mass produce masks, gowns, and ventilators on a scale that nobody had ever even thought possible, never mind necessary? How do you go from that? This is just Monday morning quarterbacking of the worst kind, which you knew would happen here. Yeah, do I think the Trump administration could have moved faster on some of this? Absolutely. Do I also think that maybe the panic syndrome has taken over higher up in our government than I would like it to, and that we're being told that our lives are determined by stats and facts, and then we look at the stats and facts because, thank you, Internet, we can see what they said a week ago, what they said 2 weeks ago, and they keep being wrong. And if you ask any questions, you're a bad person who doesn't care about your grandparents dying. This is the way that the debate keeps. It's cyclical now. It keeps going through this. Okay, well, what they said isn't true. Do we think that it's going to be true in a few weeks? Or why do we keep getting told that in the next couple of weeks it's going to be this? And then 2 weeks goes by and it's not that. It's always a lesser version of it. And they say, well, no, it's because of mitigation. And then we say, well, hold on a second. Your models claim that this was with mitigation, not without mitigation. They say, oh no, but the mitigation's gone even better than the models. I mean, this is the problem with trying to use numbers to predict, to predict the future, which is what's going on here. This is a very complex system. Now, yeah, can you tell if it's going up or going down? Sure. They know that cases are going to go up and deaths are going to go up. That all has been correct. They've been right on that. So on that fundamental point, fine, established, clear. But a lot of what we're doing is based upon the severity of this. And for those of you who are listening to the show right now out in Kansas, in Denver, in San Diego, in Austin, you all have different levels of cases. You all have different state and local ordinances that are in place in order to try to keep people safe. And this unwillingness to rely on data in the specifics place by place seems to me to be curious. I would like a better explanation for why that is the case. But I got to bring it back. I got a little bit off for a moment here because I want to go to the debate over chloroquine. I mentioned to you this hydroxychloroquine, by the way. I mentioned to you this New York Times story, but the part of it that has really gotten a lot of people very worked up was this. This is from the New York Times, okay? If hydroxychloroquine becomes an accepted treatment, several pharmaceutical companies stand to profit, including shareholders and senior executives with connections to the president. Mr. Trump himself has a small personal financial interest in Sanofi, the French drug maker that makes Plaquenil, the brand name version of hydroxychloroquine. Okay, folks. This then turns into, Morning Joe is actually a show with unbelievable. It's a show with people on it, for people watching, who all of them think that they're really, really bright, and they say idiocy on the show, and then they take in the idiocy and think it's brilliant at home. What does that say about the viewers? The show is a mess. It's a appalling stupidity on a daily basis. And the Morning Joe host, Mika Britton, and now wife of the host, it's whatever. Morning Joe host Mika Brzezinski suggested that Trump has a financial tie to hydroxychloroquine. She said a lot of people would say follow the money. There's got to be some sort of financial tie to someone somewhere that has the president pushing this repeatedly. Now, before we get in, there is a financial tie. And it's so laughably absurd that only a moron could think that it matters at all. And I mean that. But before we get into the financial tie, notice the assumption that is built into this. The assumption is Trump doesn't care enough about his fellow Americans and care enough about human life to merely want to just root for a drug that could end up preventing a lot of people from dying from organ failure because of this virus and ARDS and the cytokine storm and all these different processes that doctors don't even really understand all that well. You know, they know what it is, but they don't know how to stop it, and they don't have a great toolkit for reining it in. But with all of this going on, they won't even give the president. This reminds me when I said on the Bill Maher show, well, before all this happened, I said, President Trump does not want a single American to die from this. Can you at least, it is, whatever you think of him ethically, and I think he's a much better person than liberals do. I think he cares about people. I think he does his best. And he's not a perfect guy. No one's a perfect guy. But no matter what you think of him ethically, politically, he doesn't want a single person to die from this. So his interests are aligned with the interests of the American people in this, no matter what you think of his ethics. They wouldn't even concede that. They just ignored that. You know, Bill started cursing, and that's what they do when they get into a real discussion over there. Someone just starts cursing and making stupid jokes because they don't have real arguments to make. And it reminds me of this. They will not concede that President Trump would just root for a drug to be successful because he wants people to feel healthy again, because he wants less death. Whew. Mika Brzezinski, whatever they're paying her, it's not enough. It's not enough to just light your soul on fire in front of America every morning. It's there's no way she's that stupid that she really believes that. But it's very personal, you see. There are a lot of people for whom the Trump derangement is a personal issue. With Mika and Joe, they thought they were going to be in the close to power seat here. They thought they would have a president that they had a very good personal relationship with. And when that was taken away because Trump had they had a falling out, now they're just on an anti-Trump jihad all the time. Okay, back to hydroxychloroquine and Sanofi. Because you have other people, blue checks aplenty. Ian Sams, who is this guy? I got to find out. I don't even know. He's a blue check. So he's one of these verified. Oh, National Press Secretary for Kamala Harris. There we go. He was one. They're all over the place. I mean, I could just line them up. And now one thing that libs like to do that's very annoying is when we all know they're saying something, they go, who's saying that? No one's saying that. And then you got to go and you pull together 10 different tweets and videos of people on TV saying exactly what you've said. But this is now just a way to gaslight you. No one's saying that. And then their friends, their followers, yeah, this person's lying. And then you go and you find all the proof because they're all saying it. And then they just don't respond. This is one of the games. This is like the way that children debate, children argue. But the left is really the political party of crybaby children. Hydroxychloroquine is made by a whole bunch of different companies. There is no patent right now on hydroxychloroquine. It is off patent, which means that different companies can make and do make huge amounts of it as a generic drug. So there is no huge finance. Anybody who's not a moron, which does not include our elite media, by the way. There are some very, very stupid people in our elite media. Anybody would understand that the financial incentive for Trump to push this drug does not exist. Trump might as well be out there talking about, how he really wants people to drink, water out of the tap. And then people say, oh, he's trying to make a fortune. He owns, stock in Evian or so. It's so dumb that it defies belief. There's not going to be some huge amount of money there because any pharmaceutical. How do you pick the company that's going to make all this money off of it when they can all make generics? And they will make generics because this is a emergency case usage. But it's even better because the New York Times reported on this. The small financial interest. I want to take you through exactly what the president of the United States, what his financial interest in a hydroxychloroquine making drug company. Remember, we've already talked about how they're assuming that he doesn't just want it to be better for people, which is insane. And they are skipping past the fact that this is not it's a drug that's off patent, has been for over a decade. So it's cheap and it's going to continue to be cheap. And then they just blithely glide past. How big of a financial stake does he have? Oh, I'll tell you. All right, hat tip Mike Cernovich, who pulled this together on Twitter, and I saw the financial breakdown, and it's exactly what I would have expected. I tweeted out before even reading this, well, what are we talking about here? A few $1,000s of stock? No, it's not even that. Trump doesn't even own stock in the company per se. He didn't buy equities that are tied to Sanofi, or that are part of Sanofi. No, he owns $1,000 to $15,000 of Dodge and Cox fund, according to his financial disclosures. Docs and Cox's fund has 2.9% of its money in Sanofi. So Trump owns 2.9% of somewhere between $1,000 and $15,000. Trump owns between $29 and $435 of stock. The New York Times was talking about his financial interest in this drug maker. These people are out of their GD minds. This is the biggest newspaper in the country. We're going through a pandemic. They think Trump is rooting for this drug to work so that he could make $50 maybe? He's a billionaire, you imbeciles. What are you doing? And Mika and others, they're all running around saying this. And they don't care how stupid they are. It just doesn't matter because they hate Trump and that's all that they can think of. But this isn't even off brand for them. The Washington Post and others did all this analysis of people who were going in and buying. This is true. And they tried to get this going with the emoluments clause, right? This is back before the pandemic when life was normal. If they did an analysis of foreign diplomats who bought food and drinks at the Trump hotel bar. And it was something like a couple of $100,000 over the course of the first 2 or 3 years that Trump was in office. And it was dozens, if not hundreds, hundreds of different diplomats that they're talking about here doing this. And they said that, well, maybe this will influence his foreign policy. This is buying this is buying access. No, this is buying a cheeseburger. You utter lunatics. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with the left? Like, there really is a mass psychosis of anti-Trumpism, and they can't get a handle on it, even now. They really believe the president is rooting for hydroxychloroquine to work, not because it would perhaps save us from, the collapse of America. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but things are getting pretty sketchy out there, folks. No, he's not rooting for it for that. He's not rooting for it to save a lot of lives. It's so he can make $50. That's how evil he is. Anyone who believes that is a moron who should be careful when they try to tie their shoes.